to our interview series on brave feminine leadership. I'm excited today to have the opportunity to introduce Sally Bruce into the conversation. Welcome, Sally.
Thanks very much, Melissa. Great to be here.
Sally, I'm going to touch on your bio briefly so that our audience have got some background, and then we'll jump into the conversation. So Sally Bruce is the COO and CFO of Culture Amp, the world's leading employee experience platform with more than 4,000 business customers in 47 countries around the world. Sally's worked for more than 25 years as a senior executive at global organisations, and her roles have included Chief Executive Officer of AMP Bank, Chief Financial Officer, Business and Personal Banking at National Australia Bank, and a number of senior roles at the Macquarie Group. Sally also serves as Director of Rising, formerly the Melbourne International Arts Festival, and also a Director at Chief Executive Women. Welcome again, Sally.
Thank you.
Now, can I ask you in the first instance, for people in our audience who haven't had the pleasure of meeting you before, can you tell us a little bit about your journey and I think importantly, why you are who you are?
Yeah, sure. I think I'm really defined by some things that were kind of gifted to me. I'm a country girl, so I grew up in rural Queensland, and I'm the youngest of six. And those things have stayed with me. I originally went into banking, and as you said, have had about 25 years in banking, and it was really prompted by being a country kid with parents who are small business owners, and really recognizing that where the capital went to was really important in determining people's destinies. So as a little tacker, I said to my mum, I'm going to work in a bank because I know that the country people need money. And I didn't understand the kind of concept of directing capital, etc., but I was experiencing it. And as small business owners, mum and dad were worried about the 50 mortgages of the team, of the people that were working for them, rather than their own. And so really put me on a journey that my mum said right from the start, you won't be a banker, you'll be too bored. Did I prove her wrong? It was really, in pursuit of how do we get capital in the hands of the right people. And I'm a really big believer in that with enough capital, and a believer in sufficiency rather than having more than you need, just so many problems go away. Relationship pressures, education of your children, mental health strain, kind of crime goes down, addiction goes down, gambling, all of those things go down if you have enough. And so that put me on the path. The other thing is, I tell people I'm the youngest of six. I think that's really important to know about me because it explains a few things. Firstly, I love people. I'm meant to be in a community and in a crowd. And so work and the people sport of that is a great joy for me. The second is I'm the youngest of six. So I have no regard for hierarchy.
I love that.
Right from the get-go, I had to be taller, I had to be in the conversation, etc. And that's really stayed with me as well. And I'm really grateful for, the grounding of both those things. So a long career in banking, which was really I was really, really blessed. Three kind of stages of that. The first with Macquarie Group, and, what a place to start your career. Amazingly just invested in me to grow as much as I could. And my first job running a P&L with them was at 21. I think that's quite remarkable to be given that opportunity. And then I moved from there to NAB, and NAB again was really a magnificent organisation for me. I ran their mortgages business for many years, and then was the CFO, which is the role you discussed before for the personal and business bank. Had never been a CFO, so kind of surprised myself to find myself doing that job. And then jumped from there to AMP Bank, which was just a joyful role for me, where I was CEO of the bank, and I really had an opportunity to shape it according to my values in an unrestricted way, which was absolutely brilliant. But also one of the great lessons of life is who owns you is important. And so
Yes.
AMP Bank was a really separate entity with its own board, etc., but was owned by AMP, obviously. And when AMP went into crisis, that created crisis in the subsidiary as well. So lots and lots of learnings from that. I can keep going, but as you know, I'm here at Culture App now, which is really, a hook turn from where I was.
So many questions to dive into. I'm going to go straight into, I'm assuming that you haven't ever had much challenge finding your voice, being the youngest of 6.
I think I worked it out pretty quickly. And by all accounts, I walked at 9 months, which, as you know, is really young. And anyone who knows me knows that actually I'm really uncoordinated. So it's quite remarkable that I found my feet at 9 months. So I can only imagine I found my voice as well, because I had to kind of muscle in.
So let's go to each of those jobs, I guess, a little bit, and just think about some of those roles. And so let's start with Macquarie. And, I remember, it was a big decision for you to move on from Macquarie, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I started Macquarie when I was 18. They hired me while I was in first year at uni. So, literally I grew up there. And, that was just, such good luck to land in such a wonderful organisation like Macquarie. But I'd been there 20 years and I just wasn't satisfied anymore. And, it was niggling me for quite some time that I didn't really think I was learning anymore. I could play the meetings in my head before I got there because I knew who all the players were. I knew them well, I respected them, but I could also kind of work out and get in front of what the dialogue would be. And I started to get anxious about, am I not learning? And I'm not a great person to be bored. I should be challenged and I should be stretched. And I had 2 small children at that stage. And I think a very practical person would have said, you've got a great job in an amazing organization. I wouldn't disrupt that now. And I sat for about 2 years before I made the decision to leave. And I had lots of people telling me that it was an absolute madness to leave. But I knew in my heart that my time was done there. I had loved it. It had served me well. I had served it well. But if I was going to continue to grow and continue the journey of learning, I needed to go somewhere else. So someone literally said to me when I took the job at NAB, you've just gone from one end of the bell curve to the other. What are you thinking? And I tell you, I knew this is a pretty big move, but I didn't expect everyone to be so vocal about it. But it was brilliant. It really, my heart was telling me the right thing. And I said, I have no regrets for my time at Macquarie, but what I've learned since, I would never have learned there. I would have learned different things, but I'm pretty happy with the decisions I've made.
So you're at NAB, and one of the things I remember you telling me that has stayed with me was when they offered you the CFO role, you weren't quite sure they meant to offer it to you.
Well, I'd been, as I said, running the mortgage business, which was, their largest product. And so that had gone really well and I'd turned that around. And so then they gave me all the consumer products to run. And that's pretty sensible progression. Go, okay, you've done that there, take on the rest.
Yeah.
And so I was doing that and I hadn't been doing that very long. And I got sort of a tap to say, hey, would you be the CFO for the personal bank and the business bank? And that's 80% of NAB. It's each one of those is like the size of an ASX 50 company. And I've always been a bit brave and crazy. And I thought, I'd have a crack at that. And then, but I paused and I said to them, you do know I'm not a CFO. I'm not a chartered accountant. I've never been trained in accounting. So rather than us have an awkward conversation in 6 months' time when you work that out, did you really mean to offer me this job?
Yeah.
And I just thought, I have to put this on the table because it's a niggle in the back of my mind. And very gratefully, they went, yes, we know all of that. None of that is a surprise to us. But we love how you run businesses, you're commercial. We see your numeric acumen, you know how the economics work, and we need strategic financial guidance. And we need you beside the CEOs of each of those, and to help them get there faster. So we've got lots of people who can supplement you in terms of being chartered accountants, etc. So if you're up for it, we're game, and I'm totally game. And so off we went.
Sally, did you have very good mentors or sponsors at that point in time? Like, would you have pursued that opportunity on your own, or was that really down to someone spotting that capability?
Look, so I wouldn't have pursued it on my own, and mainly because I've always had my head on. I love running businesses. I love running teams. I love running businesses, and so the CFO role was really tangential for me. But I'd had a few people who were kind of guiding me and advising me as I went along, and talking to me about different tangential roles that I could consider. And so there'd been a few seeds planted, and there were definitely people within NAB who were really backing me and going, look, let's see how far she can go. And I mean, what a massive chance to take on someone. I mean, I knew stepping into that role what a privilege it was, because I walked into, quite a large department of finance professionals who were brilliant and who had probably been working 20 odd years with their eye on that role. And then I get airdropped in from nowhere, so there were people who had confidence to give me opportunities. Cameron Klein at the time was the CEO, and he was a really big believer that you back talent. But there were a number of people in there who were opening my eyes to possibilities. And, frankly, because I'd been in Macquarie for 20 years, whilst it was a magnificent place, I was a little bit insular. I'd never actually thought about what else I could do. And so they really opened my eyes to that, and that there were different possibilities. So very, very lucky.
One of the things that's definitely come out of these conversations and talking to people is, some of the females I'm talking to who've made it to the most senior levels of business, like yourself, have had a good breadth of career. And to a certain extent, whilst you did 20 years at Macquarie, you've certainly managed and are continuing to kind of pursue that breadth. Is that deliberate? Is that, not learning? What is that?
Yeah, no, I think in my example, it was good fortune. So when I was at Macquarie, I was there for 20 years. I did many things. So I left Macquarie having managed pretty much every aspect of the value chain, from sales to technology to the balance sheet. I'd had a really good run at many roles across the organisation, and the organisation was really good at giving you those opportunities. If you were a safe pair of hands, and an opportunity would pop, it would be, offered to you. And I really learnt the art of that, of being someone who was really reliable to do something that was ambitious and interesting. And that really crafted me as a generalist. And I really worked out that I could do anything if I surrounded the right people around me. And I didn't need to be the smartest. In fact, it's so much better not to be the smartest, to hire people smarter than you, and to know what I wasn't good at, and to create a brains trust. And I really learnt that craft at Macquarie, and that it didn't really matter if I was the best person for it, because no one beat a great team.
Yes.
And so I learnt that craft, always made me a generalist. And it wasn't actually until I went to NAB that I realised that there were these really narrow specialisations. So, I'd go in and I'd see the risk team or something like that, or the balance sheet team, and they will have been working their entire career on balance sheet management, or, capital management, or treasury, or or risk, might be operational risk or credit risk. And it was the first time I'd really considered that there were these deep technical specialties. And it was great for me, because then I really worked out that was a really important part of the brains trust as well. You know, the team you built around you. I'd lived with a lot of generalists for a long time, and I worked out that actually what makes the world go round is the combination of the generalists and the specialists. It really made me value and appreciate something I wasn't, but it also confirmed for me that I was never going to be one. I'm too quickly bored, and I love to be able to deep dive and then pop out and do something else. So I would have been a nightmare. I was very lucky to land in a place that incubated me as a generalist.
So how did you find your role at Culture Amp, your most recent role?
Yeah, no, well, this is a really interesting story, because I had made a decision to move cities, and I've got 2 teenage children, and we were moving from Sydney to Melbourne. So it was clear to me I wasn't going to stay in my Sydney-based role and be 5 days a week away from my teenage children. And so I made a decision that I was going to resign, and I made a decision that I was going to, you can probably take, some time off and, really embed us and our lives back into Melbourne. And I hadn't lived in Melbourne for a number of years. I would work out who the good people were who were doing the interesting things.
Yes.
And from there, I'd reconnect and find a new job. And I was turning 50, and I thought, actually, if I don't do something different now, I'm probably not going to. And if I've got 10 years left at work in executive life, I'll run out of runway to do something different. So I sat there and I thought about what I loved about work, and I loved the team sport. So it had to be people-based. I really love strategy that's led by culture, and I'd spent all my years developing cultures that drove strategy, and that they were always culture-led. It had to be purpose-driven. I wanted it to be fast-growing because I like a challenge, and I don't like things that stand still.
Yep.
And finally, I wanted it to be positively disruptive, because I also love that. And so I literally just came up with that list and started talking to, the people I trusted and I knew in Melbourne, and saying to them, hey, I need a new job. I want it to be Melbourne based, and I want it to kind of tick all these boxes. And there were 2 types of people. There were the people who were really frustrated with me and said, no. What is it? Like, is it like CEO of this, or what is it? And no. I can't name it. I want to find it and find the people. Yeah. And then there were these other people who went, yeah, I totally get it. That sounds great. And one of them was a great friend of mine and neighbor. And I was talking to her about it, and she really got it. And she said, I know someone you should meet. And we were in the deepest, darkest lockdown where you could walk for an hour a day. And as, an extrovert, 6th of 6, locked in my own home, like I had a walking schedule because, and my family needed me to be kind of catching up with other people too. And so she introduced me to this guy and said, I think you two will have a lot in common. And he just lives like a kilometre away, because we had the 5-kilometre radius. And I went, oh yeah, I'll go for a walk with him. And I started walking with him, and it's Didier Elzinger, who is the CEO and founder of Culture Amp. And so at that stage, Culture Amp was navigating COVID, and it's a largely offshore business. So 60% of it's in the US, 20% of it's in Europe, and 20% here. Mm-hmm. And so, running a complex business in COVID times, the US and the UK are really being poleaxed, quite different to here. And we just started to go walking and talking about where the business was at, what was happening. And I was sharing my story. And Didier said, look, I really think what you're looking for is at Culture Amp. I look at all the things you said you're after. And so what we landed on then was Culture Amp is growing incredibly quickly, sort of doubling pretty much every 18 months. And he said, look, we've never done culture at scale, and that's what you've always done. You've never done technology or SaaS, but that we're really good at that. So maybe there's a 1 + 1 = 3 here. And so in my usual kind of way, I thought, oh yeah, I'll have a go at that. And so here I am.
I love that on so many levels. I love, how many walks were you on before you guys got to that point?
Oh, we did a lot of walks.
Okay, so it wasn't just one walk, because that would have been extraordinary.
No, and in fact, because, people say to me, was it what you expected? And I said, oh, yes, it was, because we'd actually had a lot of time both talking about the business and the context it was operating in. And also I was seeing how, Didier was dealing with very stressful times. And so, sure, I imagined some things not quite as they were, but I pretty much knew what I was going into. It had been a pretty good interview process.
The best interview process. You're not going to get better than that. So there's good advice to everybody, because I'm sure that when our series airs, there's going to be a lot of people still in lockdown. So, there's ways to make things happen, even in deep, dark lockdown. Sally, can I ask, have you ever, I've spoken a fair bit about some of the double binds that women often find themselves placed under. So too hard, too soft, never just right when it comes to leadership and things like that. Have you experienced those at any point in your career?
Oh, yeah, of course. I think, there's so many traps for women. I think when you're, confident, you're perceived to be competent. And that plays really well in a gender sense from a male perspective, less so from a woman's perspective, because confidence isn't necessarily deemed to be competence. I think there's really so many traps for a woman. I mean, one thing that you may not pick up on this very, very kind Zoom podcast is I'm 6 foot tall and I'm kind of blonde and an extrovert. I'm not a small person. So I'm big in a room. It's interesting to be a big woman in a room. And, you take up a lot of space, and it's hard to be invisible. Whereas, I think lots of times women are invisible in a room. You hear it all the time, and I've seen it and I've experienced it, where a woman has an idea, but it's not heard until a man has the idea. I think one of my double binds is actually that I am big, I am present. And back to, the 6th of 6th, I don't regard hierarchy, and that plays against me and for me. I think it's really quite binary, the people who love it and the people who go, is she a bit out of her station? So, you definitely see that.
So where do you think it's played against you, in what kind of ways?
Look, it's played against me hierarchically, in terms of people thinking that I'm outside of my station. Yeah. I think it also played against me in a team sense at times. And that one was a really great learning for me, because that's something I can control, where, you're with a team and you're a kind of physically present leader who's physically large and also female. And I really worked out that sometimes the voices that were most important to be heard would not speak, because I was taking so much room. So I learnt to make myself small in those forums to try and create safety for people to speak. So kind of that's in a downward sense, the double bind, which probably doesn't get talked about as much. In an upward sense, I really have had to learn to play the longer game. I think when I was younger, I would be infuriated by it. I would feel it. I would be sidelined. I'd be pushed to the end of the table, quite literally, or not invited, quite literally. And I had some really, palpable experiences of that. And I really had to learn, instead of stepping into it and getting upset about it, that playing the longer game was the game I needed to play. And then I could be at the table to stop it happening for others. So, I got really good at navigating my way in there to be the person that actually was missed because they were so valuable and we wanted their contribution to the conversation. But then I never, ever forgot how I was treated. So, get really good at if, Melissa, you said something and then it wasn't heard until the bloke said it, going, oh, yes, well, yeah, no, you agree with Melissa. I hear that. I hear that. But I did have to play a longer game and have a bit of patience to kind of navigate some of that stuff.
Why do you think you've been as successful as you've been?
Look, one of my bosses at Macquarie said to me once that, and, it was both a compliment and not a compliment. One of my dear, dear friends still today, he said to me, I always give Sal the thing that is hardest and worrying me most. And he said, because two things happen. One, she always comes back with 110 or 120% of what I expected, and I don't have to worry about it, and it's solved. Second, it keeps her really busy and she's not a pain in the ass. So, but I think it's the first, I have a really good ability to work with people to solve things. I'm positive and ambitious, but I don't, I really drive for teams that are intelligent, ambitious, and humble. And I think the humility is really big because, we do great things, but there's no heroes. It's like the team wins. And, so at times I wonder whether, that's a bad thing, that, we don't grab more of the kudos or make ourselves large from the accomplishments. But actually, I think it's been a real kind of secret to my success because I can get things done. I don't have to kind of be the winner in the race. I want to lift the whole boat, and people really trust that and they work with that. And I work really hard to grow the people in the team. And so I just find people do extraordinary things when we line up and go, okay, we want to do this. Yeah, it looks impossible, but hey, imagine what you can say you've done at the end of it, and I'm going to do everything to help you get there. And so I've always surrounded myself with great people. As said earlier, it makes no sense to me why you would not hire people smarter than you. It has served me extraordinarily well.
Take the pressure off.
Oh, well, who wants to have all the answers? Oh my God.
and who could?
No, I'm just thinking, oh, please don't look at me. Like someone in the room must know what we're doing here. So
why do you think, a curious question that I've explored throughout the series is, we've seen, good movement at board level with females, still a way to go. But at senior executive levels, we're not. And, I refer to the CEW report actually around executives in the ASX 200, with the last 2 years, 50 CEO appointments and 3 of them being female. Why is that slow and feels like it's stalled?
Yeah, well, it's hard. It's really hard as a woman to succeed. It's, you're succeeding in a world that is not designed for you. So let's talk about caring responsibilities. And COVID is just going to be disastrous for this. I mean, I'm seeing women who are just talented and brilliant going, I just can't do it. And oh my God, like, how could they with homeschooling? We need to create a system and a set of expectations where households and caring responsibilities are shared responsibilities. And, we need to accommodate that. So flexibility in the workplace is still so far from where it needs to be. Societal attitudes are so far from where it needs to be. So, and let's just talk about the school system, pick up and drop off times, like so far from where they need to be for us to access all the amazing talent. And, when when I left uni, we already had more than 50% women graduating. So
Yes.
more women than men. So we have had for more than 30 years, more women than men graduating. So the system is not working. But I also, am a really big believer that we personally do not do enough. So I'm really big on every one of us has power. And so, just last week, beautifully, someone I worked with probably 15 years ago pinged me and said, I did a talk this week and I spoke to how you role modeled raising children and having a big job and made it okay for the rest of us. And I thought, oh God, 15 years ago. Yeah, we worked a long time ago together. But, things like that change people's destinies.
Absolutely.
And so are you as a leader providing absolute flexibility? Like I remember a long time ago it was when I first went to NAB. I said to them, if you want to work flexibly, no, the answer is yes. The question is, how are we going to share responsibility for that? And oh my God, it was so controversial because all the people leaders who reported to me went, what have you done? Like you've just said every one of my team can ask me to work flexibly and I can't say no. And I went, yes, I have. And so, we have a lot of personal power on this stuff. We have personal power to keep women in their jobs by making it easier. We have personal power to make sure that they're paid fairly. We have personal power to hire diverse teams. Like you don't need to wait for the company policy for this stuff.
No.
Like, sure, the company may not be there, but your team can have absolute flexibility, freedom. They can have like pay for like roles. You make those decisions. And you can have, the most diverse group of people across gender and all other attributes, whether it's racial, religious, sexual preference, etc. Like you do that. And I think we wait too much for people to do it for us. And actually, one of the greatest gifts for me of going into the CFO role was I walked into the finance department and I had the most diverse team I'd ever had. And so I just can't believe we don't use our finance departments more. Like they are full of really smart women.
Yes.
And they are full of people of different cultural backgrounds. Like I walked in and went, I don't have a diversity problem in here. This is the first time I've never had a diversity problem. Yet, like there was no one tapping into that resource and going, well, like these people are really smart, really commercial. They understand the business. Put them in a line role. Like, why are we not using every finance department in the country to seed line role succession? Like it's crazy. It is actually the most likely role to go to CEO, but we still don't get the women or the people of color or diversity to the CFO. Like we don't even pull them up in the channel they're in, let alone seed them across the organization. Like, we don't use our personal power. We the system has to change, but it's only going to change by us doing that because you get a tipping point.
So I have interviewed, a number of guys in this series too, and whether it's the guys or, regardless, some of the feedback that I hear, and I think generally we hear, is it's hard to find the female talent. Now, they're not saying the talent's not there. They're actually identifying the talent and often encouraging that talent to kind of stand up. But I think some of the points that were flagged with me was, it's 4 times as hard to convince a female that, yes, they can take that job on compared to potentially a male who might be waving their hand around with potentially less suitability. Have you ever had that experience yourself in promoting women into senior roles?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, at Culture Amp, we actually put on our jobs when you get to the bottom of it. If you're a woman, it is well documented that if you have 6 of the 10 things we've asked for above there, you'll think you're not qualified. Do us a favor and apply.
I love that.
And but like I've just done it right now where I have a VP role, and the first round of candidates we got were awesome, all white men.
Right.
And so I can tell you the mood in the room dropped when I went, that's awesome. Like, you've done a great job, but I'm not shortlisting until I have some women.
Yep.
And so that required, and literally I contacted everyone I knew in the world pretty much who for that specialization would have a connection, and said, I want some diverse candidates. They can be culturally diverse or gender diverse, but if you know anyone who is talented who could apply for this role, I want their name. So I got those sent to me, and I actually got everyone running out into the network to pull people in. It added months to the process.
Yeah.
And, someone said to me, we're going to lose the best male candidate here because they'll take another job. And I went, possibly.
Yeah.
Anyway, this week we ended up, having it was last week, the final interviews with the best two candidates, one male, one female.
Yep.
And unanimously, we landed on the side of the female candidate, which was really fantastic because, there's no sense of compromise, etc. And the person who I particularly frustrated in this process went, I've learned something here. You've got to work hard to get them. You've got to work hard to find them. And, I've turned down jobs where, one was on paper, it looked amazing. And I actually just knew it wasn't where I was going to thrive as a woman. And strangely, it was the thing that I nutted it out with was they had a major sponsorship for their brand.
Right.
And it was a sporting sponsorship, but they only sponsored the men's sport. And I said to them, so you don't sponsor the women? And they it was kind of like, oh yeah, no, we've never thought about that. And I just went, yeah, no, I'm not going to work here. That's actually quite unbelievable. And I think organisations trip up all the time because women go, you're not going to provide me an environment to thrive. So if you're having trouble attracting women, I'd be looking at, are you helping them thrive? Because women are the greatest networkers ever, even though it's not in the pub or the golf course or all the places you think it is. I'll ring a girlfriend in a heartbeat and go, is this person okay? Would you work with them?
Yes.
Are they going to let me go home when I've got a sick child? We do that masters. We're world's best practice at that. So the network will tell me, should I work at that company? I go, go there for a skill. Don't go there to stay there because they'll be terrible and you won't be able to manage your other commitments. And so if you can't attract women, I think you're not looking hard enough, or you're not working hard enough to provide an environment where they believe they'll thrive.
That job description line at the bottom is genius.
That's good.
Sally, a lot of people feel that they're stuck. They need to make a decision about maybe leaving somewhere, or they're not learning, or a whole range of different things. What's your advice to people who are kind of feeling stuck at this point in their career potentially?
Yeah, I'm really big on make the change, back yourself. As I said earlier, I worked around AMP Bank during the AMP crisis. And, there are a lot of people who were quite genuinely concerned, with everything that's gone on. Should I stay here? Can I actually move because I've got this on my CV, etc. And I was constantly saying to them, you are not stuck. That is your perception. Your perception is you can't move. And yes, there are times when it's harder than others. I think if you're 9 months pregnant, resigning might be a bit tricky. Or your spouse is out of work, or there's things like that. But most of the time, the constraints are of our own making. I left Macquarie, and Macquarie is an amazing place. I loved it. And but I truly had drunk all the Kool-Aid and was frightened that there was nowhere else good in the country to work.
Yes.
And I've met so many of my colleagues who go, are there really good places outside of Macquarie? Because, Macquarie's great. I go, yeah, no, there are great places and great people. you can find them. They do exist. And so I think most of those constraints of our own making. And I would advise anyone who is lacking the confidence to make the change to find the person that they regard the most and they trust the most, and ask them if they think they've got potential elsewhere.
Yep.
I know the answer will be yes.
Yes.
And then they should listen to them.
Yep.
They should feed their ego a bit and listen to them.
Sally, in my conversation with David Thodey, he talked about seeing some leaders who won't reach their full potential because they lack self-awareness of their impact on others around them. You sound like quite a self-aware leader, particularly when you talked earlier about sometimes needing to reduce your impact to create space for others and things like that. So, Sal, what would your advice be about the 3 questions a leader should ask themselves to become more self-aware?
I think the first one is something I referenced earlier, is, are you doing everything in your power to create a better workplace for your people? So much that we can do without waiting for the system. And I think that's incredibly powerful. And spending some time of reflection on what are the things in my control that will create the best work environment is only stuff that's going to amplify your leadership. Those insights are just so valuable, and you change the world for the people who are working for you. The second one is, and I'm a really big believer in having a network of people who you can really share with. And so I create relationships with people where the rule is I will share wildly with them. Anything I have that is useful to them, be it knowledge, be it IP, whatever it is, I will make it available to them to help them be successful and help them on their way. Some caveats, obviously, in banking, can't be illegal, you can't be colluding, all of those kind of things, but that's pretty easy to navigate. No one asks you to do that stuff anyway. It's like, have you done this before? Who have you used? I've got this problem. And so I really index on doing that, because what is reciprocated is extraordinary. And that is, you have a group of people who are both, well, they're capable, they're trustworthy, and they're generous. And so they're a great network of people to help you, and it can help you with things. But what's really great from a leader's perspective is they're great with advice and they're great with feedback. So in this situation, what have you done? How have you seen it? Or what am I doing? What am I missing? And giving you the feedback. Perhaps this is what's going on. This is how you show up. This is what's going on. And I find that the feedback thing and finding people who can give you feedback is just gold, because it's hard to give feedback, and you have to be courageous, and you have to really care, because you can give someone the feedback they need to hear, but you have to risk that they may not respond well to it. And so only people who really care for you are probably going to be brave enough to do that. And so facilitating that environment where people will tell you what you need to hear. And, I think you have to kind of pay it forward. You pay it forward with trust and creating that. So that's really, really big. Look, and the last one is you've got to role model what you want to see. You really, really do. If you're doing it, it's not do as I say, not do it as I do. You actually really have to. And when I ran the mortgage book at NAB, every week on a Tuesday, I would leave the office at 2:30. Now, Tuesday was particularly important because once a month, the RBA would meet on a Tuesday and would set interest rates. And so one of those Tuesdays every month was a bit of a nightmare because it was RBA day. But actually, that was why I chose it. I chose it so that no matter what was going on, I walked out the door at 2:30 on a Tuesday. And I'd pick up my kids from school. I'd have a chat to their teacher. We'd have play date day. So I'd meet their little buddies. I'd have a sneaky Chardonnay with the parents. So I'd meet the parents. And the team knew at 7 p.m. I would be available again because my children had 7 p.m. bedtime.
Yep.
And so, we'd have media inquiries and things like that. They'd hold them until 7 because they knew I was prioritizing family. You got to role model this stuff because actually your permission feels a bit like bullshit.
Yes.
Unless you're doing it. And it's no, someone else telling you it's okay is always a leap of faith. It's still a leap of faith, but unless you're role modeling it, it's not going to happen. So policies aren't going to get you there. So I think that's a really big way to be self-aware of how your leadership and your shadow or your halo, depending which one you choose to have.
Sally, your career choices you shared with me have always been kind of follow your heart. What was the difference between maybe what your head was saying and your heart at some of those points?
Oh, look, there's lots of rational things, that my head was saying, stay on this. This is, more trusted. So for my last move, I was sort of sitting there going, well, if this is a disaster, have I actually lost ground on everything I've built? Like, will I no longer be the executive with the kind of carriage that I have now because I made a misstep and I had a folly into a different industry, etc. They're the kind of things, like, I don't think they're any different. Your own self-talk is the cruelest. Something wonderful that my husband taught me many years ago when I was deep in negative self-talk about myself was he said to me, if it was Rach, who was a very good friend of mine, and you heard her say that about herself, how would you react?
Yeah.
And it stopped me in my tracks. So it's still to this day, I apply the Rach test to what the voice in my head says. And we've even named the voice in the head. Their name is Homer, and he's not very wise, and he speaks to fears, not truths, and we tell him to shut up.
Go away, Homer.
Shut up, Homer. No room for you here.
Sal, the last question I ask everybody is, from your perspective, what does brave feminine leadership mean, and do you think it needs to change?
There needs to be more of it. But I think it's be you and make it safe for others to be them. We've done some research at Culture Amp because we survey across the globe, and we have got data that shows that if you rate high on belonging, if your staff say they belong, you will outperform. We've proven that on the NASDAQ, on the FTSE, and on the ASX of all our survey companies. So, be you, show it's okay to be you, and make it okay for others to be them. And I had this conversation recently with some chief executive women colleagues that we have to be braver. We have to be braver because, yes, there are more consequences for women for being bold.
Yes.
There absolutely are. Let's not pretend there's not. But if me, as a white and privileged woman, can't take those risks, how can I expect anyone else who doesn't have all the natural born favor that I have? So it's on me to make those steps, to be the one who creates the ruffles. Because, if I'm a young woman, like, God forbid, I'm Brittany Higgins, it's just, the weight of the world is against you. You've got power disbalances, let alone if they're cultural differences or anything else about you that makes you feel like you don't belong. So, those of us who are born naturally with, the wind at our back, even though there are bigger consequences, have to be prepared to face into them.
Sally, thank you so much. And, you've demonstrated by joining these conversations, you've demonstrated how willing you are to, give what you know and share what you know. And so I'm just so appreciative of you sharing your time with everybody. Thank you for being so generous with it and for joining our conversation.
It's been fun. And I just hope there's a kernel out there for someone, discard what doesn't make any sense for you or work for you, and pick up the bits that do, and good luck with it.
There'll be kernels for sure. Thank you, Sal.
All right.